Good evening and welcome to the Eastern Kentucky University Alumni Spotlight Series. My name is Dan McBride. I am the Associate Vice President for Development and Alumni Engagement at EKU, and I will be your host tonight. We have an exciting guest, and it's just in time for horse racing that we get to have this guy on tonight. He knows a lot about the horse racing industry and about horses in general, and we'll tell you more about that in just a minute. There are a couple of upcoming things that I want to let you know about as we get into the spring season. First up, our next virtual event will be on Monday night, the 29th. Monday, the 29th, we will be playing Alumni Trivia, and that will be streamed live right here. And that will start at 8 o'clock on Monday, the 29th. So if you are interested in playing trivia, just go to the EKU Alumni webpage and get all of the details on that. Our next spotlight comes up on April 6th. It'll be Tuesday night, April 6th. It's part of Scholars Week here at Eastern Kentucky University, and we will have a special guest that night. Dr. Derek Morton will be on talking about some of his work. He is a professor now teaching, and also had a very interesting path to how he got to where he is today. It wasn't always the sciences that he wanted to study and work in, and that's where he finds himself. So we'll find out more about that on April 6th. And then as we get into Keeneland season on April the 8th, we have a brand new event. This is a virtual event. It's called EKU at the Races, and it is a virtual horse racing event. Since we can't go to Keeneland tonight, we are doing this virtual event. We can't go to Keeneland this season because they are still at a reduced capacity. Normally every spring we have our Keeneland Day at the Races. So we're going to try this at the Races virtual event, and it's a lot of fun. We've done a sample game of it here with some of the staff, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So if you like horse racing and you like hanging out with fellow EKU alumni, sign up for that right now. EKU at the Races coming up April 8th at 8 p.m. More information coming soon about that. Okay, I think that's all the plugs. That's all the stuff coming up, and there's a lot of stuff coming up as we get into the spring season. Tonight we are very excited, though, as we get into horse season, to have our guest. He is a 1986 graduate of Eastern Kentucky University with a public relations degree and an agriculture minor. He got a master's at EKU a couple of years later in sports administration. He's the 2019 Department of Communications Distinguished Alumni Award winner, and he currently serves as the Director of Industry Relations for the American Association of Equine Practitioners, organization I didn't even know existed until I was preparing for this show. Even though I've known Keith for a lot of years, but I didn't know that that organization existed, and maybe he'll tell us a little bit more about them and what they do. Please welcome to the Alumni Spotlight, Keith Kleine.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Hey, Keith, I'm great. Thank you for being here. And again, apologies. I had no idea that there even was an American Association of Equine Practitioners. Tell me what it is and who they are.
Probably still don't know what that means, right?
I have no idea. I'm hoping you can clear that up for us.
Yeah, well, it's a long way of saying horse doctors, horse veterinarians. So it's an association that's been around, 65 years plus. We're based out at the Kentucky Horse Park. My office out the window looks at the polo field.
Wow.
And we put on education for the most part for about 9,000 plus equine veterinarians. And we have veterinary students at 38 chapters at veterinary schools across North America and the West Indies, and even over in the UK as well. But the education, while that's majority of what we do, there's a variety of other things that we do as an association.
And you specifically, I know your title is Director of Industry Relations. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it means I wear many hats, and I've worked in the industry for quite a while, as you well know, many different breeds, many different disciplines, and because of that, I have a lot of contacts. But my specific jobs within the association, I work with our foundation, which is the charitable arm. We raise money for scholarships for veterinary students, educational programs for those students. We have research grants, equine research. We have benevolent programs. So a lot of the disaster outreach, relief and training we do. So Hurricane Katrina was my first year on this job, and I learned literally by storm. So that's an area that I spend a good bit of time in. And as you know, storms continue, but we've got veterinarians that are out there and doing good things. We also work with what we call equitarian. So these are like Doctors Without Borders, but these are horse doctors going down to underprivileged areas in other countries. And they are helping not only the animals themselves, donkeys and mules and horses, but also the people, to train them and work with them so they know how to better care for their animals. Because a lot of them use their animals for their day-to-day work, to get to, the market, to get to school, and other things. And then we also focus on the at-risk horse. So that's on the foundation side. And I've got a great team that I work with, wonderful volunteers that are very involved with that. I also work with our educational partners and our sponsor programs. So a lot of the revenue generating side comes from our department. A lot of large pharmaceutical companies, feed companies, you name it. They're all working with us. Of course, they're trying to get in front of and gain access to veterinarians, but they're also helping us with the education, which is so needed. Veterinarians are trusted individuals, as you well know, for the animal care. So veterinarians are a high commodity, and a lot of challenges right now in the veterinary space. We can talk about that here in a bit. And then I also work with our infectious disease committee. While I'm not a veterinarian, and actually we have no veterinarians on staff, we're here to run their association. So we go to them as the experts to provide the information. And as an association, whether it's a small group or a large group, you're just helping manage the volunteers that are providing that expertise. And then I'm also, now I'm not a registered lobbyist, but I work with our public policy committee. So I spend a good bit of time in Washington, D.C. We've got a variety of equine issues, and I work with the American Veterinary Medical Association, as well as the American Horse Council on national issues. And then we've got various state issues as well. So you can tell my job is very diverse. So no day is alike.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing a little bit of everything, but I'm guessing that that's part of what makes the job so much fun. And so, I mean, you've been doing it for 16 years, so obviously you enjoy what you're doing.
Yes. I had moved jobs probably every 5 or 6 years. And, when you're young and you're trying to experience and do different things, you want to become a manager. Sometimes that's what you have to do. But I'm back home now. I've spent a number of years in Texas, and I enjoy it. The people are great to work with. It's a great association, and we do great things.
Let's talk. I like to do this in a little bit different order. Let's talk about, as you leave EKU, after you finish up, get your master's, did you know at that point that you wanted to work with horses, or what were you thinking as you left EKU and went out in the job market? What was your career aspiration at that point?
Well, I think I kind of always knew I wanted to work with horses. I went to high school with you and your brother. So literally, I went to school at EKU from nursery school through my master's degree. And literally, most of that, even in the same building, because mass communications ended up right next to the playground that I played on in kindergarten. As you well know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can't even leave the same building. But during my middle school and high school years, as you well know, I would leave Kentucky and I went and worked on a farm. My aunt and uncle had an Arabian horse farm. And back in the mid 80s, in 85, actually, the tax laws changed. And having a father who was and mother, both education-driven individuals, teachers, I had no choice but to go on to college. But I was fortunate that I was able to actually finish a good bit of my undergrad while I was still at Model and while I was, doing co-op at the farms and other things like that. I even worked at the Red Mile while I was in college. So I kind of knew, and I'm probably one of the few in many careers that actually stuck in that space. I saw you had, as we called him, Ron Radio, Bill Bryant. We went to school together. And, Bill was classic, and he still is. And I love seeing him, on TV every day. But Bill dressed like that even in college. He was a guy, and we knew what Bill was going to be doing, and he's doing exactly that.
Yeah, and doing it well.
That's right.
And one of the things, and let's talk a little bit about your EKU days, because one of the things I remember, and I think you are the third guest maybe that we've had on this show, coincidentally, who worked during your school time for Carl Park in the sports information office. Isn't that right? Didn't you work with Carl?
I did. Actually, I was his graduate assistant. And I think it was either before or after me, Sam Holbrook, who another one of my friends that went to school with. But yeah, I was fortunate, and Carl and I are still very, very good friends. Joanne Whitlock worked with us in that office. It wasn't a big office. We were there at in the football stadium, and Jack Frost, and it was a small team. I look back at how times have changed, and we had a fax machine that you could pick 4 minutes or 6 minutes, and then you had to dock the phone. So things have really changed over time, but I learned a lot from every experience, and I kind of put myself into work, which I enjoy. Carl, really taught me a lot and let me, learn on my own as well. Going into athletics, I would be, there with him. We might be turning off lights at the end of the night. I remember in the old, in the football stadium, we had this rickety 2-story thing that you had to take a long stairs up, and it basically was on telephone poles. And we had a storm that came through that literally drenched everything. So I'm pulling out plugs and, you name it. So I learned on the job, in various ways. But and then from there, I even went on and became an intern at the Ohio Valley Conference office.
Yeah.
So I spent some time there. I think it was 6 or 8 months. And I worked for Jim Delaney, who, it was the 40th anniversary for the OVC at the time. So I've been fortunate to really get in the right spots at the right time. And, I thank many people for that.
Hey, you mentioned working a lot while you were in college, and I remember you did work a lot, but you also found time for fun. I know you were very active in your fraternity. You were a Phi Delta, right?
I was. I actually pledged when I was a junior, as growing up in Richmond, we were always called the Richmondites. And I kind of felt it was an opportunity for me to meet some different people. Nothing against my high school friends. We're still very close, but it allowed me to do some different things. And again, like me, I fell into it, and some of them are still my very best friends. Dr. Ralph Thompson, who is still there, a longtime individual. But I fell into the leadership position. So I was able to be president of the Phi Delts, and, was able to help Doc get the chapter advisor award for the national fraternity and get us our founders trophy, which was for the best of the smaller schools. So I've never been shy. Yeah, I have fun. And there's probably people on here watching wanting to tell stories about me. No pictures of First Street and all that, but I had fun, but I worked hard too.
When you look back at your time at Eastern, and it is a little bit different for guys like you and me who went to Model, who basically grew up on this campus, and then going to school here. But so we're very familiar when we get to college with the entire campus already. But what are some of the things that you remember about your EKU experience that make it kind of stand out?
Well, it always goes back to the people. And there are individuals that, I look at as mentors and those that really kind of helped me. And there were challenging times. We had a friend of ours that we lost during that time, Robbie, as you well know. Mm-hmm. And that was difficult. He was part of our fraternity, but we also grew up with him. And there were individuals like Dr. Stanlin, who really helped me through that time, which was tough. My parents, of course, father who ended up finishing out as a dean at the university, and my mother, both my brothers went to EKU. Different career paths, all three of us, but again, wonderful. I look at friends like Doug and Joanne Whitlock, who, still remain engaged and with everybody there in the EKU family. And they're still very close to us. Kelly, Carl and Shelley Park, for 6 months, actually, before I moved on to my racing career, I worked in the EKU admissions office. So I worked with Donna Kenny and Shelley Park and learned a great deal. And, I hated doing it for only 6 months. Donna hated me leaving because she just spent all that time hiring me. But again, I was able to set a new course for my career. I look at people that in my own school, Ron Wolf, who's no longer with us, was my advisor. Libby Frost, Dean Cannon, again, some of those people that mentored and helped me along the way. And then, EKU has built lots of friends beyond that. Even after I came back from Texas, others that I met, Gene Palka, who's there at the university, partnered on a horse with us. So you just never know. The EKU family is there and extends beyond. But yeah, I would say, my time with the fraternity, my time in school, and everybody that engaged with me. And of course, I was there during the heyday of football and basketball. And, again, very fortunate to be there when things were very strong in many ways.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the places you've been, and you worked with the Quarter Horse Association. You've been in Texas. You worked for a while at Churchill Downs, right?
I did. Actually, that was the job that I left EKU for. And it was funny. I remember sending my resume over to Carl Schmidt, who ended up hiring me. And, back then, Churchill Downs was a pretty small operation. This was 1988. I was coming off the internship at the OVC. Carl had just been hired, and he was a sports information director at University of Miami. So we both had similar backgrounds, and I think that kind of, elevated my status. I remember going to the interview, and the guy that they had also talked with wore one of those fish ties, and I didn't wear a fish tie, so I think that may help as well to date the fish tie thing. But I remember sending my resume, and even the chairman of Churchill Downs was looking at things. You couldn't imagine that now. He wasn't a fan of the Arabian horses. And Carl mentioned this, and I said, well, you have a new resume with no Arabians mentioned whatsoever the next day. I couldn't email it. We didn't have that back then and so forth. So had to type it up and mail it again. But yeah, it was a great experience, to start out in horse racing at the show, really kind of helped me. And I learned a lot there. I did a variety of different things. And it allowed me to actually meet the people that I work with now. The veterinarians have a program called On Call, where they media train veterinarians. So if there is an incident on the track, then NBC or whoever is broadcasting can talk with the veterinarian in layman's terms, so you as the audience can understand what's happening. So me working on the track, being there at the winner's circle, that's actually how I met these individuals. And had a relationship for many years, even before they hired me.
Now, this year, if I'm correct, you will attend your 31st Kentucky Derby. Is that correct?
That's correct. And, it's funny, when I went for the interview, I'd never been to Churchill Downs before. Had never been to the Kentucky Derby. So I have never attended a Kentucky Derby as a fan. I've only attended as a working person. So even though I left Churchill Downs to move and open a new racetrack in San Antonio, Texas in the mid-90s, they kept bringing me back, and I would take vacation time, and I still do that. And I have with even in between all those jobs. And they bring me on, and I work with all the photographers, the still photographers. There's a picture of one of our EKU grads and myself, Matt Cornwell, and that was from 2016, it looks like. But I work with all the photographers and kind of map out where they're going to stand. I would say it's a glorified security guard at times, but over the years, I've learned where the horses go, where the photographers can go, where they're safe. And then I also work with all the activities in the winner's circle. So, I think there have been times when I'm pouring water on a horse that might need it. Here's a picture of me removing a fake credential from somebody. And there's Rob Carr, another EKU grad, with his big camera right there.
Oh, wow. Rob
there's
a great
a number of
photographer.
EKU people that I work with, even in the horse space, doing different jobs.
Now, 31 straight Kentucky Derbies, but that's not all you do, right? You now do this or have done at least for some other Triple Crown races and other races as well.
Yeah, starting out Churchill Downs, and then moved on. Belmont hired me. The Breeders' Cup, I've done, probably 20 plus Breeders' Cups and various other tracks throughout the U.S. I'd actually never worked Pimlico, the second leg, until American Pharoah's year. They always had their local guy who was helping them. So I always will tell people, I said, see, if you'd have hired me sooner, you'd have had a Triple Crown winner.
Triple Crown.
And then because of the relationships, I've worked Dubai World Cup, which actually is this coming Saturday. I won't be there. And then last year I even went over and helped out at the very first Saudi Cup. So yeah, it's taken me different places.
But in some of those races, especially the ones in Saudi Arabia, they are big money races, right? That's a lot of money.
Yeah, so the Saudi Cup was the first one, and it's a $10 million race with additional $10 million of the full race card. So that is the richest day of racing in the world right now.
You mentioned you're not going to be going this year, but talk a little bit about how COVID in the last year has affected the racing industry. I know obviously not having fans there, for one, has been a big part of it.
It has. We look at a variety of things, and while not having fans there, it also, because the industry, and it's an outdoor event, many of the states worked closely with their entities, and they were able to keep running for the most part. They were able to keep, there might be times when the jockeys colony might have COVID running through, and that might put some challenges to them. But depending on the state that they were in, they actually found some benefits from COVID. And the benefits were mostly on television because you didn't have a lot of other sports occurring. So horse racing was able to lean into that space. You probably saw an increase in wagering across the country. And there were, different things like that, but there were challenges. Certain tracks wouldn't allow their jockey colony to travel. So they had to lock them down and keep them in that bubble. But, it varied, and it varied state to state, as I'm sure it did with many other industries.
Absolutely. We do have a couple of questions here from some of our viewers. So I want to get to those before I forget about them, because sometimes I forget about them. First up, Teresa wants to know, what were some of the unexpected turns your career took to get you to where you are now?
Well, there's another EKU grad who's gone on to do great things as well. I'll give you a good example in some of my public policy work. Teresa worked in Washington, D.C., so I was able to get to see her. And I didn't know her. She was actually one of my father's students. But to answer your question, Teresa, there were a lot of twists and turns, and you just never knew. So I'll give you an example. One of them, when I left the racetrack when I left Churchill Downs, I could have stayed there and I probably could still be there. But I wanted to be a manager. I wanted to run my own shop. So I was hired as a publicity director. Well, I joined a racetrack that literally within 6 months, we were declaring bankruptcy. So you talk about a challenge. Okay? I learned a lot. I stayed on. I had to, unfortunately, let go about 28 people from my team. I had never done marketing. I'd never done sales before. And as other people were let go, because I was a hard worker and spent a lot of time, wasn't related to some individuals, I was able to stay on. And then fortunately, we got through the bankruptcy. I was able to hire most of those people back. Those were challenging times. It was a night racetrack. So I'm working on, doing press releases and buying ad time and convincing the Budweiser guy to still work with us, as we're not paying bills because of the bankruptcy and so forth. But you learn through those failures and challenges, no matter what, in a career. So that was a turn. While, it was not fun during the time, I still have very good friends there in San Antonio. The track is still there. It has survived. And I learned a great deal during that time.
Yeah, oftentimes we learn as much, if not more, from the adversities than we do from the successes. Next question is from another familiar name. Scott Tracy says, tell them about your first job interview in Virginia.
Wow, I thought we were going to be kind here, Scott. So remember earlier on when I told you that I thought I wanted to be a horse trainer, and Scott actually went with me on the first interview. Well, it didn't go so well, and I was not real happy about it. So we went to Virginia. There was a beach there. I'm like, it was kind of depressing, actually. So I said, let's just go back. He's like, no, and I didn't have much money. So we stayed in a crappy hotel and, variety of things. So thank you, Scott, for bringing that up.
Yeah, a fond memory. Speaking of memories, as you look back, obviously I would think American Pharoah in the Triple Crown would be a big one, but what are some of the highlights or some of the things that the industry has given you that you've been able to witness or be a part of that you really cherish and remember most?
Well, a number of them, just being in that winner's circle in that space. I have met a lot of people, variety of individuals, from leaders of the free world to musicians to you name it. And that's always enjoyable. Most of them are friendly. Here I'm a little bit younger. I think this was 93. Before there were photo bombs, President Bush was there. And actually, when I left to open the racetrack in San Antonio, I have another picture, I'm not sure if you have it, of his son there in the winner's circle, because he cut the ribbon at the racetrack. He was then governor of the state of Texas. Oh, there it is. Okay. So here I'm photobombing the other Bush. But again, things like that, those are fun. I'll give you a good example. You've heard the name Kenny Chesney. So we paid Kenny Chesney $4,000 to play at the racetrack in San Antonio. It would probably need a few more zeros to get Kenny Chesney to play now. Different experiences. From a horse racing standpoint, while American Pharoah was phenomenal to be around and justify and all those Triple Crown winners, to this day, Zenyatta and the Breeders' Cup win at Santa Anita was still probably one of the greatest highlights. Just hearing that crowd when you're out there standing on the racetrack is very different than when you're in the stand itself. And it was almost deafening. So some great experiences, and there's probably, lots more in different areas as well.
Both of our questioners have follow-up questions. We'll do Scott's first. He said, did you ever think about starting your own public information company?
No, not really. Who knows? Maybe when I retire, but I like having a place to go. COVID's been tough on me. I'll be honest. I like coming to an office. Working from home is not my thing. And probably if I had my own company, I'd have to do that. My freelancing work is probably as far as reaching as I'm going to go. But I spend a lot of time just talking with young individuals that want to come into the horse industry. I've got friends and others that will say, you know what, Keith has worked in so many different places with so many different people, and I'm always happy to give that time. Same thing with any of the EKU students. I do that from time to time as well.
Teresa, her follow-up, this is her comment and question. Diversity has always been a challenge in the horse industry. Have you seen change during your years in the industry?
Well, I have, especially in the veterinary space. So if you look at veterinary students as a whole, it is about 85% female now compared to previous years. We're an aging group in the equine veterinary profession, and we have some real challenges right now across not only the equine veterinary space, but veterinarians as a whole. There are challenges with work-life balance. Young individuals that are coming out of veterinary school with $200,000 in debt, and most people don't know that. You go to your veterinarian, you think it's expensive because I'm paying for that, but there are real challenges with those veterinarians. They're not getting paid a whole bunch when they get out of school. They still aren't able to react and work on as many animals as they need to. So they've been an undergrad and then another 4 years in veterinary school, and then they're challenged with sometimes abusive horse owners. The diversity challenges alone with that, with a heavy male-dominated area in the horse field, and then you throw young female veterinarians at them, it's ripe for challenges. There's compassion fatigue. There's a growing suicide issue within the veterinary space. So lots of things as an association that we're dealing with. The diversity issues, there are lots of challenges there too, because of the expense and the requirements for good grades to get into veterinary school. It's just challenging alone to get into veterinary school. The opportunities are less for some of the diversity aspects as well. So these are things that not only us as an association, but I know AVMA and others are working on.
Now, I know right now I don't believe that you own any horses, but you have been able to put together some groups, and particularly using some of your EKU connections and friends to kind of put together ownership groups and own some of your own horses, right?
We have, not always successful, but that's the horse racing game. I've owned a couple. We had our very first horse was named Stroll to Victory. We bought it as a partnership. A couple of my fraternity brothers, Tim Walker, Melvin Hutchins, and Kevin Bonetta, who you know well. And then we had another horse, and that horse, we were fortunate. His very first race was at Saratoga, and we ran second to Bobby's Kitten, who then went on to win the Breeders' Cup turf race. Our second race, where Bobby's Kitten beat us, we got an ankle chip and we had to lay him up, have surgery. Fortunately, I knew Dr. Bramlage, and it was funny. I emailed him and I said, by the way, the horse you're working on today is my horse. So he sent over with a courier a note along with a vial of the chips. And he said, everything went well. The rest of him is going home today. So that horse came back and he won at Keeneland, and we found some success with him. Another one that Carl and Gene and a variety of others, horse was named Rise to the Occasion. There's my buddy Carl, KP, there he is. And I mean, we've had fun with it. As I talked with them and built these partnerships, I said, don't expect any of this money back. All right. And horse racing can be challenging. A lot of people will say, you want to make money in horse racing? You want to make $1 million? Start with 2 million. All right. Well, there's a reason to say that. And, you kind of have, and there's a reason they call it the sport of kings. Sometimes there's a lot of luck, but there's a lot of praying in between. But if you can have fun with it and be realistic, some people say, well, it's expensive to have a horse. And I will say, yeah. And I will say, how are those kids working out for you too? Because those can be expensive. So there are kids and we can have fun with them. I also did some pin hooking partnerships. One went well, the other one not so well. And that's just the way it goes. It's a tough game.
Chris Kleine, which I'm sure you know very well, has a question. Knowing you travel so much, how many sky miles have you banked now?
Oh, well, yeah, I do travel quite a bit. So I'm probably on, I don't know, 1.5 million miles between two carriers right now.
Holy cow.
And again, because I know a lot of people in different places, I'll take vacation as I'm traveling for work, and then I'll go stay. Matt Waters, who we grew up with, I'll stay a couple extra days and see him or others when we're in other places.
Matt's in California, right?
Matt's in California. He's won 6 Grammy Awards now for doing the sound for Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a lot of travel. Last year I worked the Preakness, and the only other race before was Saudi Cup before everything started getting locked down. So I'm back to barely silver status, I think, on Delta. I'll be lucky to get peanuts.
Well, let me ask you this. Everybody would assume, because you are in the industry and you've been in horse racing your whole life, are you the guy that everybody wants to go to the track with? Are you the guy who always handicaps well and picks the winners?
Well, some say that until they start wagering with me. But I think, there's a trusted source. They will come to me, and, I will say I really liked the poly track when it was at Keeneland. Now they've gone to the dirt and it's a little less challenging. I'm not, if I'm going to play races, I like to have a little fun and win big and have fun with it. Betting on the favorite all the time and, knowing exactly the outcome, that's not my thing. So yeah, because I spend a little more time on it, but honestly, now that I'm in the job that I have, I don't get to the racetrack that much other than when I'm working. So I'm not able to experience, in this job, I'm working with quarter horses and sport horses and you name it, every breed, every discipline, and every issue. It might be wild horses one day and the challenge is there. It might be donkeys and mules for another issue. It could be, a tail docking situation on something else. And, you had mentioned before, my experience with the quarter horse, I love the quarter horse itself. It's the most versatile of the animals. I don't have any. And I'm actually president of the Kentucky Quarter Horse Association. And jokingly, my friends in the quarter horse space, I've said, why did you all want me to do this? I said, I don't have any kids. I don't have a wife. I don't have a horse. I'm not judging. And they're like, you're perfect. You have no conflicts of interest.
I was like, they're going to make you president of the PTA next.
That's right. Yeah.
You mentioned the poly track, and that kind of leads into this question, I think. Steve Greenwell wants to know, what is on the next horizon for the horse racing industry, and what is the one thing that you'd like to see in the rearview mirror? In other words, what's new in the industry that you're looking forward to, and what are you glad that may be going or getting behind you?
Well, there are a lot of challenges, as you well know. And of course, I'm working in the veterinary space. So the welfare issues and medication issues are things that, are big in forefront. I'm hopeful that we can continue to work with the industry to improve and show change. There are certain, and I have to represent veterinarians in their positions on certain issues. And I'm not going to get into all the politics of certain things, but, in the case of some of the medication use, there are challenges. And in the veterinary world, if you are a veterinarian and you know this medication works, you're going to want to use that. Now, are there abuses from trainers, from owners, from all kinds of participants, even veterinarians? Yes. You're going to have that no matter what, whether you're in the transportation industry or, pharmaceutical or, whatever it is, you're going to have different abuses, even city council or you name it. So as long as you can work to mitigate those and educate people, whether it be legislators, whether it be horse owners, those are all the things that you want to try and work on. What do I want to see move forward? There are challenges that we have a younger population that doesn't experience animals. They don't experience them firsthand. So when you look at horse racing, those individuals are playing games on their computers or on their phones. They didn't grow up in rural areas, so they're not experienced with the animal themselves and the appreciation of that animal. And this isn't just horses, it's cattle, it's, across the board. Welfare issues are changing and the views of animal welfare are changing. So I think those are things that we as a community and as a country have to evolve with. We have these things happening in other political parts of our world. And you just have to work to manage those accordingly. There are challenges, I think, in horse racing that we're struggling with the number of horses that are available. And you're seeing that in California right now. You're seeing that in other states. You're seeing challenges with larger corporations. Nothing against that, because sometimes that's needed. But you have the challenges of larger corporations coming in, taking over racetracks. And again, I work with Churchill Downs, but you see what's happening at Arlington Park. That track will no longer be around. And whether you have a good opinion or bad opinion about that, those are things that are going to change. There were a lot more racetracks around in the 40s and even 20s and before that. Well, they were the only game in town. You did not have any other types of gambling per se, other than maybe Las Vegas. You didn't even have lotteries. Well, the lotteries are run by the states, okay? So we have our own states that are challenging the abilities to raise funds in some of these areas. So lots of challenges for the horse industry, horse racing industry as a whole. But the biggest thing, I think, is moving from rural to urban is going to continue to only grow, and it's going to continue to make those animal welfare challenges and views of it concerning.
Yeah. Kathy has a question. And I think obviously this is going to be an inside joke. Do you think you still have a future as a champion clogger, or perhaps dancing with the stars?
My friends, they're on my list here. So yeah, so that's taking me back, Dan. I was real popular with the women in high school, as you well know, hanging out, yes, being the photographer with Marcy at Model. But yeah, my mother and I actually took clogging lessons, and I was never a real professional. We had fun with it. I still have fun with it. I jokingly say that now I only do it at weddings, at Kathy's wedding, one of them, by the way. But I need EMS nearby. They laughed. You see behind me here, I have my 2 diplomas. Well, one of them is a master's in physical education, sports administration, but I'm a hefty boy here, so I failed on that one too.
We're getting close to running out of time, Keith, and I definitely want to ask you a little bit about your thoughts. Keeneland is getting ready to start their spring meet, and of course the Derby coming up in May. We're still coming out of the COVID, the pandemic. What are your thoughts about the meets as they both get ready to start here in a few weeks?
Well, we're spoiled in this area. There's no place in the country like Keeneland and Churchill Downs to be, or racing, as a whole in Kentucky. So when I go out to other places, I've been to the racetrack in Eureka, Kansas. You didn't know they had one, right? You didn't even know there was a Eureka, Kansas. And I even went to a racetrack in Myrtle Beach. Where they dug up the ground. They had a 3-horse gate. They had 2 jockeys show up, and they were doing Calcutta. So none of it was legal. They were quarter-horse races, and they ended up into an arena, so you had to pull them up quick. So racing in this area is so different, and we are spoiled. I've actually been on airplanes flying back into Lexington where people have said, I've never been to Keeneland before. I'm like, how is that possible?
How is that
but
possible?
It is. And I understand that, depending on where you live and so forth. But to answer your question, the tracks here, they spend a lot of time to make everything safe. You're going to have the best of the best here. The Derby's coming together. Sadly, one of Baffert's horses, Life is Good, had a minor injury, came to ruin rule, I think, over the weekend. And he won't be running a Kentucky Derby. But, of course, Bob Baffert has another one right there, horse named Concert Tour. I've got a horse that I'm following. His name is Greatest Honor, and I think he's going to love the 1.25 miles for the Derby. Shug McGahee, Hall of Fame trainer. So there's a lot of great racing still to occur. And when you're 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, you just pray that everything stays safe and you do the best for them. And hopefully you have some luck and can see your friends in the winner's circle.
Amen to that. And it's been a pleasure getting to see you tonight, my friend. Great to catch up and hear about your career and share a lot of stories about some people we both know. And I've enjoyed it. We really appreciate you doing the show with us tonight.
Glad to be here. It's good to see you, Dan.
All right. Thank you very much. That is Keith Kleine. He is the Director of Industry Relations for the American Association of Equine Practitioners. And we appreciate Keith being here tonight. I want to give you a little bit of information on some things coming up. Coming up on April 8th is a new event, and some of you may be horse racing fans. It's At the Races. And we have a At the Races promotional video, and I'm going to ask my people behind the scenes, are we going to play that? Do we want to play the promotional video? If we do, let's roll it and tell you a little bit about At the Races.
The horses are in the gate. They're trying not to hear the cheers of the crowd. And there they go. This looks to be a real 8-way contest.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Wow, look at all these people. This is very fun. Very fun indeed.
All right, there it is, At the Races. That is coming up April 8th at 8 p.m., and you can find out more about that at eku.edu alumni.eku.edu if you want to know more about that. Our next virtual event, Monday night, the 29th at 8 p.m., we will have alumni trivia presented by the Student Alumni Ambassadors. Don't forget to tune in for that. Our next spotlight is coming up on April the 6th, part of Scholars Week here at EKU. Dr. Derek Morton will be our guest for that. Until our next event, that will wrap things up for us from the Campus Beautiful, the Blanton House. I'm Dan McBride. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.